Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Conference of Consulting Actuaries Leadership Development Podcast. My name is Michael Clark, host of the podcast, and I'm joined today by my good friend and also CCA podcaster, Ed Pudlowski. Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Real happy to be here today.
Ed, just so that people can get to know you a little bit, I want to give everyone a bit of your bio. So you are president of MorningStar Actuarial Consulting, which is a firm that Ed actually founded himself back in 2017. We're going to talk more about that today. He's a past president of the CCA. In fact, he and I worked very closely together. I followed in his footsteps there, and they were big shoes to fill. He's worked as a healthcare actuary for various firms over the year, including Mercer, EY, Buck, and American Fidelity. And I mentioned he is also the host of CCA's Innovative Healthcare Solutions podcast, which you can find on the CCA's website. I would highly encourage people to check it out. I am a pension actuary by background, and I get a lot out of listening to Ed's podcasts as well. It gives me ideas, things that I've even taken back to my employer to say, hey, have we thought about this? So, Ed, I appreciate what you're doing on that front.
Oh, yeah. It's so interesting to be on the other side of this for a change, Michael.
It is yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I'd be a good guest for your podcast, given my background.
We'll figure out how to work that in.
So, some other interesting things I want you guys to know about Ed. He is the current chair of the International Actuarial Association's Health Section, which we are also going to talk more about today. And he's a member of the IAA's Executive Committee. He has 3 kids, one of which is an actuary, although he's a pension actuary like me, not a healthcare actuary like Ed.
I don't know where I went wrong with him.
So a big shout out to Eric. So Eric's a great guy, great actuary. If you have a chance to meet him, you absolutely should. Ed's also a big hockey fan. You coached your kids in hockey, didn't you, growing up?
I did. I got roped into it after moving to Dallas and, the growth of hockey here. So, and anybody knows me knows that, I probably don't skate quite as well, but I understood the strategy of the game.
And even though you mentioned you live in Texas and you've been there for almost 30 years, if I'm doing the math right.
26 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, coming up on it. So are you a Stars fan?
I am. I'm both the Stars and a Penguins fan, but if the Penguins are in town playing the Stars, then my allegiance goes back to my Pittsburgh teams.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Ed, let's get into some of what I want to talk about today, and let's actually start with your career path. I always think it's really interesting to hear how people progress through their careers. So up until you founded Morningstar back in 2017, you worked for a number of different firms. What made you go down the path of starting up your own company?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was really looking for my next challenge, and that's kind of been the theme kind of throughout my career, if you will. I actually started with a large health insurance company, but after a little while, I realized that while I was progressing very well there, that I really just wanted a different challenge. I felt like I was becoming a better insurance company employee and not really kind of growing and developing. So I really thought that I wanted to go into consulting because I felt that not only was a different challenge, but also provided me the opportunity to work on more diverse issues. And also, I really felt that solving problems for other employers would be more gratifying for me. So I really enjoyed that. And that's when I went to Mercer, and then I left there to go to EY. And there again, it was kind of another challenge for me. And EY takes a much more different perspective on delivering consulting services. And there, I ended up having the role of looking at the overall HR function at organizations and how that could be transformed under broader corporate objectives, like if they're focused on cost reductions, mergers and acquisitions, or other similar corporate transformations that were going on. So that really broadened out a lot of my consulting skills from what I had just kind of within the confines of kind of an HR consulting at a firm like Mercer. From there, I really wanted to start my own business, but I actually got sidetracked as 2 longtime associates kind of roped me into one kind of help revive a struggling consulting practice, and another one actually kind of starting up a consulting business as part of a supplemental large insurance company. So I really got sidetracked for a few years, but it was also a great learning experience for me. So I really started my own business because I really identified a market opportunity that was underserved in the actuarial community and thought it would be a great place for me to work. And fortunately, that void was still there after I got out of working for these other two organizations. So it was a underserved opportunity in the actuarial community, and one where some of the major consulting firms really couldn't participate because they would have been conflicted out. It was also an interesting challenge to apply what I learned as a leader of my prior firms to my own business, things like how I market, how I develop business, managing my own financials, developing business plans. And of course, I also had to deal with all the taxes and other corporate filings, but all of that was kind of a lot of fun. So it's just kind of along the theme of just wanting to have a new challenge just to kind of keep me interested in what I'm doing.
So you mentioned you had this thought of starting up your own business years before you actually did. You mentioned a couple of tangents or roads that you went down that prevented you there. What was the pull to start your own business then? I mean, you clearly kept that dream alive despite looking at some other things in the meantime.
Yeah, sometimes the corporate world can be a little bit more of a challenge in terms of the process you go through to make decisions. I'm a big fan of efficiencies, and to be spending a lot of my day being in meetings with entities that needed to make decisions in mass, to feel some safety. I've never felt that I needed to have that kind of safety net underneath me to make some decisions. I always felt comfortable in where I was going. And a lot of it has to do with some of my decision-making process and the fact that I really enjoy getting a lot of diverse opinions. So I feel like I'm always working with at least the most available information to make those decisions. But the other aspect of it too is, I don't think I could have started my own business when I was in my 20s or 30s. I just don't think financially I wasn't in a position where maybe I was willing to take that risk. But I think there are other things like the connections and the relationships you've built over the years that you're able to leverage off of when you start your own business.
No, I think that's really interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that'll be listening to this that will be thinking along the same lines about, how do I get started? When do I get started? And feeling the same way about wanting to have a little bit more control over some of the day-to-day of what gets done and how it gets done. So I
Right.
think that's good. I'm sure people will be happy to hear your experience there too. So you've been running this firm now for about 8 years. What have been some of your biggest lessons learned from running your own business?
Yeah, I think probably about three things. There's a need to create your own brand in the market. There's a huge value in your prior relationships, and nothing can beat a strong reputation. So, one of the things I did quickly was develop what, we all know is kind of an elevator speech, and that clearly and concisely identified what I did. And that was kind of instrumental in some of my success as a business owner. My ability to do it in terms of the value it provides to prospective clients has offered me more introductions to meeting than I simply would have got if I told them I was a healthcare actuary, as an example. So let me give you kind of like a kind of real life scenario of how
Yeah,
this
do.
kind of all played out. So, I was at a local business group health meeting here in Dallas, and I had run into um, a guy that was a sales rep, used to be from one of the major insurance companies, and we connected. It had been a couple of years, and he asked what I was doing, so I gave him my elevator speech, and he now had kind of moved on and was working actually in the area that I was targeting my marketing to. So it was just by chance that I ran into him and knew him, and so I mentioned what I did, and he said, you got to come meet my CEO. And coincidentally, a CEO lived here in Dallas, so we were able to quickly get a meeting set up. It was funny. I walked into the meeting, and he had mentioned the gentleman's name, but it didn't register with me. But when I walked in, he looked and he goes, "I know you." Uh, we had worked together at Mercer, although we were in different offices, and I don't know that we ever had much interaction. So somewhere along the way, my name became known to him, and so we chatted a little bit about that. So we talked off and on for about 2 years, and never, talked about things that, how he could expand his business in the market and some of the things that he needed to really move that forward. And it never really moved with him as CEO. He left that organization, went elsewhere, and I've actually kept in touch with him in that new organization. But in that initial meeting, he got me in contact with his CFO and his chief marketing officer and a few other people in the organization. And about 6 months after he left that company, one of the other people I'd interacted with got back to me and said, "Hey, Ed, we really need to talk about the services that you provide here." So I ended up doing a project for them. They ended up getting acquired by another company. That company reached back out to me, and I've been doing work for them. Meanwhile, the chief marketing officer and some of the other people left that firm that acquired them, started up their own company, and they called me back, and I did work for it. So there's one point of contact, and having an elevator speech, leveraging off past relationships and kind of my reputation, ended up getting me 3 clients, and I'm still working on the new opportunity with the original CEO that I met. So it just shows you the value of leveraging those relationships.
Yeah, no kidding. And I like what you said too about just creating your own brand and having that reputation, which is something that I mean you hear a lot about. There's lots of different um, seminars and things about building your own personal brand. Whether you're doing that as a sole proprietor or as an individual working within a company, it's such a powerful thing to be able to not only develop, but I think be cognizant of as well. Being able to say, this is what I want to be known for, and this is what I'm willing to do for it.
Yeah, and you got to start building your reputation early. It's something that builds and develops over, kind of a long career. The people that you met and interacted with along the way will get to know who you are. So you can't start that too early in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so looking back on your career, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your entry-level actuary self if you could go back and talk to that version of you?
Yeah, it's a good question, Michael. First of all, I'd say don't undervalue the benefits of kind of building those strong relationships that we talked about. I know for me, I certainly didn't burn any bridges with people I met, but I felt that, early in my career that I was, really focused on taking exams. I was really focused on learning how to do my work, learning new skills that I felt like I didn't build as strong as relationships with people as I could. Although, I found in talking to people that knew me from then still have a good perception of me, but I just really didn't feel like I was focused on building relationships there. So that I think is one thing that I would tell my younger self, to focus on those relationships. And I think the other thing is that I really would have sought out a mentor. I really didn't have that in any one particular individual, somebody to kind of help guide me through. And I think that through the CCA's mentoring program, I'm working with some young actuaries, and I've actually been approached even outside of the CCA program to help mentor a couple of young actuaries. People who are in their early to mid careers, and I am just finding so much enjoyment in that. I don't think if I ever would have thought of somebody as a mentor back then, I thought I would have been, creating an inconvenience for them by having them interact and work with me. But I am just enjoying it to a great deal because I find that they're bringing up issues that I've already been through in some form or fashion. So I've got those experiences and I'm able to share those. And the reaction that I get is, oh, I hadn't thought of, oh, that's a great idea. And that just kind of gives me some reassurance that I'm really providing some value to them. So, I would say those two things. Make sure early in your career you're kind of building some strong relationships and, seek out a mentor in some form or fashion. And, if anybody's listening to this, the CCA has a great program for that. So you can easily get yourself connected with somebody that be willing to mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you, I mean, being on the mentor side of things, like what do you get out of that personally and professionally? Obviously, you wouldn't do it unless there was some satisfaction and personal reward that you get out of it.
You know, I think sometimes we take it for granted what people know and that they think and understand like we do. So when I see that I'm helping individuals advance their careers, that's just so rewarding to me. I don't know, at some point in time they'll think back and look on it and say, boy, that was really helpful. But honestly, just understanding that I'm helping somebody kind of move forward perhaps faster than they otherwise would have in their career, help them avoid some of the mistakes that I know that I made, early on in my career, is really the thing that I get out of it, just the satisfaction of seeing them grow.
Yeah, no, I like that. I've had similar experiences, not necessarily with newer actuaries or mid-career people, but through my ties with my university, I will get a couple of reach outs every year from kids that are looking to get into the profession, whether through an internship or an entry-level job, and I've been able to mentor them through that process to help them think about and prepare for applying for jobs, actually doing interviews, thinking about those. Um, yeah, it is really rewarding to be able to see somebody that you've helped be able to succeed in even a step in their career.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to talk to actuarial clubs at a number of universities, particularly around the Texas area, so not just within Dallas, but outside. And it's kind of great to kind of help shape some career paths that people are looking to be an actuary. Maybe they haven't taken any exams, or they're thinking about it, or they've taken a couple of exams. But really helping them think about what's an appropriate career path. And I always tell them after I meet with them, I say, please let me know kind of where you're going and what you're doing. So I have a number of people that I've talked to over the years who were, in college and hadn't started their career path yet, that we routinely keep in contact, whether it's through LinkedIn or they just even email, say, hey, I found a job here, and if I can help them find a job someplace. So it's really rewarding to see that happen with these young folks. And of course, the more people I can entice into the actuarial profession, the better, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, let's continue on this conversation about just the different actuarial organizations that you volunteered with and are currently volunteering with. You've obviously been in leadership positions with the CCA, which is how you and I originally met, and now with the IAA. What have you gained professionally from volunteering in the various roles that you've had over the years?
Yeah, Michael, I've said this and I've heard you and others say the same thing. You get much more out of volunteering than you give to it. And first and foremost, it gives you access to potential relationships that you would have never had the opportunity without volunteering. I doubt you and I maybe we wouldn't even be having this conversation if we weren't involved in volunteering. And there's so many other people that I've met both on the board of the CCA and through my interactions with the IA that I never would have met before. And, to some extent, those are helpful in developing opportunities in my business that I wouldn't have had without them. So there's certainly that benefit. But honestly, I just thoroughly enjoy reconnecting with those people and with whom I volunteered, and just seeing and hearing about your families and how you're doing. You and I always talk about, your three boys. You're always interested in how my kids, and particularly Eric, since he's an actuary, and how he's doing and things like that. But the other thing that I found I got out of it that I hadn't thought about, and it really came from there was an actuary who was familiar with what I was doing in the market, and he wanted to introduce me to a prospective client for me. And he started the introduction, and I think he made some comment about me being the past president of the CCA, and I thought his comment was really interesting. I'll share it with you. He said, Ed was president of the CCA. He goes, and that certainly doesn't speak to the skill that he can bring to your project. He goes, that's what I'm here to do. He goes, but that really tells you the respect that he has within his, the actuarial peers in the actuarial community. And I thought about that, says, wow, that really is true, I think. So the extent that you volunteer, and I don't think you need to become the president of any organization to get that. I just think working amongst your peers and being among them gives you a level of respect that might be a little bit harder to obtain without that.
Yeah, no, I like that. And it gives you exposure too to those various people. And I like how you put that in terms of its opportunities to build more relationships with people, because that can then translate into well, you never know what it can translate into, like you said,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's I think that's part of the beauty of what volunteering can do for an individual is get them connected with people that they might not otherwise be connected with, and then that opportunity for networking. There's always opportunities to introduce people, and you never know when those introductions are going to come back your way to benefit you in some form or fashion.
Yeah, that's really secondary. I really enjoy
Hmm.
connecting with a lot of people. I mean, even at the meetings that we go to, I go out of my way to talk to people that I've had limited or no interactions with.
Hmm.
But it is, as you said, kind of an added benefit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned also your involvement with the International Actuarial Association, and you're currently chair of the health section of the IAA. Tell us a bit about the organization and why someone can consider joining. I imagine there's a lot of people out there, even among healthcare actuaries, that aren't familiar with the IAA's health section.
Yeah, it's really a unique forum for health actuaries to address issues on of global significance. So, we're right now we have a number of different project teams focused on various things, including digital and AI driven healthcare solutions. How we conducted a study on how different countries provide healthcare and the financing mechanisms behind it, just to understand what's different and try to compare them and contrast them. And what you find is that there's not just one way of doing things. We conduct surveys on the prevalence of health-related insurance policies that operate around the countries, and we're now starting up a new one on how health inflation varies by country. So, for me, being a healthcare actuary, the U.S. healthcare system is so unique compared to how healthcare is delivered in other countries. And as a result, we often lose sight of the various challenging facing individuals in other countries kind of outside the US. So it's been a huge learning experience for me to be a member of the health section. It's really expanded my knowledge of healthcare, really allowing for a more diverse perspective than I otherwise would have been able to get on my own.
So, if you were having to give your elevator pitch to another healthcare actuary here in the U.S. for joining the health section, what's your elevator pitch for people to get involved?
Yeah, it just is an opportunity to, one, as we talked about, kind of interact with more people that you otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to. It gives you insights and knowledge that you're not going to be able to get. I mean, the health section, and I know, Michael, you're the executive director of the International Actuarial Consulting Association, which is another section within in the IAA. And we, any members of those sections get to enjoy the access to all the webinars that are produced out there. So you get easy and kind of quick access to a lot of that information. But the biggest thing, as I said, that you get is you really just get to understand a more diverse perspective on how healthcare operates in other countries. And you can really take that information and use it in your own life. And it really expands your experiences.
Yeah, excellent. Let's talk a little bit more about because your IAA volunteerism isn't limited to just the health section. You're also on the IAA's executive committee. And for a time, you were the CCA's representative on what was the inaugural strategic planning committee for the IAA. From your perspective, what value does the IAA bring to the actuarial profession on a global basis?
Yeah, the IAA is really an association of associations, right? So it operates differently than, we think of as a CCA and a Society of Actuaries, et cetera. And that it's really meant to represent the views of those member associations that exist. So right now, the IA has about 100 organizations that are members. That serves over 90 countries because, like the US, we've got multiple associations in our country and a couple of other countries too. And it represents about 80,000 actuaries worldwide. But there are really kind of three goals that the IA has. One is it really wants to have an impact on organizations outside of the actual profession. So we have developed key relationships with what we call supranational organizations that provide our actuarial expertise on relevance in these global forums. So they may be organizations that like represent the insurance and accounting profession, those that know and understand what actuaries do. But I think even more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to work with organizations like the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the World Health Organization, as an example. And the value there is really that it demonstrates that as actuaries, we can really play a role in addressing issues of societal importance, not just being risk managers within the insurance companies that operate. So it gives us the ability to kind of reframe the idea of what an actuary really is. The other thing we do is really try to promote the profession. So we're, supporting development of the profession worldwide, really making sure that our member organizations have all the tools they need to provide the appropriate professional and educational standards to their organization so that we maintain that reputation of what an actuary means worldwide. So it's just not, what happens in the US or what happens in the UK. Because, we all know as a profession, we're primarily self-regulated, and we need to make sure that we maintain certain standards. So it wouldn't do us any good if there were issues with actuaries in company XY, in country XYZ, is that could play not so favorably to organizations in the US or the UK or elsewhere. And then finally, we really want to advance competency. So we're really looking to develop a lot of scientific knowledge around the skills within the actual profession. So think of things like a lot of the work we've done around climate change, or of course, a lot of the work we did around the COVID-19 pandemic when that was coming about.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, having not been as familiar with the IAA until my involvement with the CCA, and specifically CCA leadership,
Same
um,
here.
not really understanding what they did and how they did. I think the organization does play a very interesting role in the global profession. Like you said, once you get outside of the US and the UK, where you might have you realize that it's a very different world out there for a lot of actuaries, where in the US especially, we've got standards that are put out there by the American Academy of Actuaries that we adhere to. When you get outside of um, some of these countries where actuaries have a little bit more established rigor around the profession, you realize that there's a lot missing compared to what we experience here in the US, and that's where the IAA can really step in. I know they help develop um, sample standards that can be adopted by these other actuarial associations, and really help, like you said, maintain the reputation of the profession on a global basis.
Yeah, the larger organizations are involved, like the CCA, the Society of Actuaries, the organizations in the UK and et cetera around the world. The larger ones really find that being involved there gives them the opportunity to make sure that not only is global profession progressing along those lines that you mentioned in terms of professionalism and education, but they also make sure that they're just providing a lot of good resources and to those smaller entities, those growing actual professions, and then the smaller ones benefit from learning from the larger organizations out there. So it really is kind of a strong give and take. But more importantly, I think it allows for the actual profession to have one voice. I mean, certainly we don't want to supplant anything that any organization is doing. We have this concept of subsidiary to the organizations that we represent. But it really gives us a chance to provide one voice by bringing all these people in as volunteers to say, what should our voice be about this particular issue? So like I said, climate change or pandemics or whatever the issue may be.
Well, and I think too, like you mentioned, working with those supranational organizations, being able to pull in great minds from all over the world to help influence policy with the World Health Organization and the OECD, like you mentioned, be able to lend that expertise on a global basis, pulling in great minds from all over the world that's pretty impressive what the organization's able to do.
Right, right.
So let's one of my favorite parts about the discussions that I get to have with people on the podcast. This is our leadership development podcast, and so I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about leadership for a section here. So for this next segment, Ed, I really want to get your thoughts around leadership, and specifically thinking about people that you consider to be successful leaders. What traits do they have? How do they demonstrate that leadership in what they do?
Yeah, I think there are there's lots of traits, but the two that I like to focus on is, being a good listener and then surrounding yourself with a group of people that offers you a diverse perspective. So, first and foremost, they listen to the needs of whatever population that they're serving, right? So if it's CCA, it's our members; at the IAA, it's the member organizations, whatever. They don't really promote their own agenda, but they really listen to what other organizations lead and listen to what's going on in the market and wants from professionals, and then develop solutions around those to address those issues. When it comes to having a diverse perspective, I'm never the smartest person in a group on all subjects, right? If I am, then I'm either fooling myself or I need to surround myself with other people. So that's why, I've always appreciated, our time that we spent on the board, having people like you there, who really are smart and offer me a diverse perspective. And you really need to have that diverse group around you so that you kind of get those perspectives and enables you to think about issues from all angles. As an actuary, I think that kind of comes naturally, that I want to make sure I'm thinking through everything before I end up making the decision. But at some point in time, obviously, all the information is in, and then you got to move from there. So you listen, you develop solutions, and then you take action on those. I may be the one to have to make the final decision on anything if you're the ultimate leader in any organization. But I want to do that with all the insights possible at my disposal, and making sure that I'm getting, diverse thoughts out of that. And you can only get diversity in thought with diversity in the people that surround you.
No, and I really like what you said there about being a good listener as well, because it doesn't do you any good if you surround yourself with those diverse perspectives if you're not willing to listen to them. So those things,
Exactly.
I do agree with you. Those things go hand in hand. Needing to listen, needing to be able to internalize what other people are saying, be able to see different perspectives, so that you really can make an informed decision in what you're doing.
Right.
So when you think about role models that you've had when it comes to leadership, and how maybe you've got some examples of who those people are or what they've done to be role models to you, and how you've tried to emulate their examples. Love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know that I have, a particular role model out there. I think I've grabbed things from a number of different people. I think back to, my parents as an example, who had a strong work ethic and who, just were always very kind and nice to people, and, who taught me that, um, there'll be big rewards if you work hard, and nothing kind of beats hard work. I remember the guy that hired me in my first two roles. He hired me in the insurance company, then he left and went to Mercer and hired me over there. So I don't know if he made the mistake twice or what, but in any event, he really taught me the value of really looking at things from a bunch of different angles before you went in to talk to any client. So I'd walk into his office and share the presentation that I had for a particular client. He'd beat me up for about a half hour, and I've always retained that with me, that I really need to think through things before I go out with it. And I remember our office head at that time too, who was a gentleman who was great at building relationships. And I think that's when I first started to realize and understand the value of that. But honestly, I've learned from a lot of bad examples too, people that I've interacted with that weren't good leaders, and the reasons why they weren't good leaders. And so, for me, I don't know that it's any one person, and there's probably not one person that exhibits so many of these traits anyway, but there's a lot of people that I've learned things from. And I've learned things from people like you, in seeing how you lead. Even though you followed on behind me, there were lots of things that I learned kind of after that. And there were obviously people within the CCA before, as leaders before, that I learned from. So it's multiple sources.
My stuff's probably in the category of here's things you shouldn't do that
No,
that
no,
you
no,
walked away
no, no,
from.
no, 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 not at all, not at all, Michael.
No, but I like, tying a lot of the things that we've talked about today together, right? A lot of it comes down to those relationships, right? And learning from other people, having that recognition that, hey, I don't know everything, but there's people out there that are going to see the world differently than I do.
Right.
What can I learn from them, both the good and the bad?
Right.
and how can I adopt some of those viewpoints or philosophies or way of being to make myself a better person, a better leader, a better consultant, a better actuary, whatever the case may be.
Well, and you know, being on the board of the CCA, that we always focused on making sure that we had a diverse board, both ethnically, culturally, gender, and just having people coming from different backgrounds really helps you to see things differently. And the IAA has been even more of that, right? Because now I'm dealing with people from a bunch of different countries, so understanding their perspectives, and those issues go beyond just things that we think about in the United States between ethnicity, gender, and other forms of diversity. So it's been very eye-opening, and you have to listen. You don't learn anything by talking. And I prefer to only speak up maybe after everybody else has spoken up so I don't repeat the same thing. But just listening and developing the solution around that is so important.
No, I love that. I think that's spot on, and I know our listeners will get stuff out of that perspective as well. So when we let's talk just to round this out. When you look at the future of the actuarial profession, and you've obviously seen it on the U.S. basis, you've seen it on the global basis. What do you view as the important traits for future successful leaders to develop
Yeah.
within the actuarial profession?
Uh, I think in addition to the things that we talked about, the other thing that you need to add into there is adaptability. The world is constantly changing around us, and you really need to kind of change along with that. So we're certainly seeing that with artificial intelligence as a prime example, right? So, I've heard from actuaries who view it as an opportunity. I've heard from actuaries who are concerned about it, right? But AI is really no different than all the things that we've seen change kind of throughout our careers, or at least I'm older than you, so I've seen more kind of change throughout their career. And you just can't get complacent with whatever success you're having today, because what drove success today is not likely to drive success tomorrow unless you adapt the approach of being adaptable to whatever's going on.
No, I like that, and that's actually come up a little bit lately in some of the other interviews we've had on the podcast. Is just that notion of being able to adapt and not be too stuck in our ways or the way we do things. And again, I think that ties back to everything else we're talking about: taking in more information, seeing other examples, internalizing that, figuring out how do I need to change as an individual, but as a profession too, like being able to be adaptable and say, okay, how can I apply new technology to what we're doing to
Yeah.
um, service the overall population or clients or whoever it is that we're serving in the various actuarial roles that we play, being able to serve them better.
I fully anticipate that my business model will change to be adaptable. I mean, what has brought me success in my own business has been where I saw this market opportunity, but that could close up. So I'm constantly kind of keeping track of where that's going, where there's still opportunity there. And if it's not going to be, where is that next opportunity for me to play? And, being a small firm, you have to find your niche, you have to play well in it, and you have to be recognized as somebody who plays well in it. So, I'm not going to do something that there are hundreds of other firms out there doing, because I just don't want to compete at that level. I want to compete on being unique. So you got to be completely adaptable if you want to continue to be successful, and that's true whether you're managing your own firm or you're working in a large association that helps develop the profession.
No, I like that. I appreciate your perspectives on all this today, Ed. I mean, so I've been jotting down some notes as we've been talking. I think I'd sum up our conversation as reputation, relationships, and adaptability. That last point that we just focused on is a key to a successful career, let alone being a successful leader within the profession.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, again, I want to thank you, Ed, for joining us today. Ed, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, probably through my email address. It's ed.pudlowski. Hopefully people know how to spell that. And it's at MorningStar Actuarial. So it's really long. .com. So ed.pudlowski at morningstaractuarial.com.
Excellent. Well, again, I want to thank you, Ed, for joining us today. I want to encourage everyone to subscribe and like this podcast to help us share stories like Ed's that can help benefit the actuarial community. The leadership development community of the CCA is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join. I want to thank Shannon Peterson of CCA staff for helping produce today's event, and want to encourage you to join us for upcoming CCA events and follow us online on social media and on our website. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And again, thank you, Ed, for your time.
Thanks, Michael.